In this video, we're going to start writing PHP and JavaScript code for our sign-up and login processes. You must have now a good understanding of the logic of the sign-up and login processes, as well as the code structure of the different files. So we're going to start by writing code for the sign-up process for now. Okay, so we're going to need to write some JavaScript code to build the AJAX call, and then we're going to be writing some PHP code to process the user inputs for the sign-up form, and then we're going to write some PHP code to activate the account of our new user. Okay, so let's start with the AJAX call, but before we do that, let's link the index.php file to the index.js file by adding a script element pointing to the JavaScript file. Okay, now let's go ahead and build the first AJAX call for the sign-up form. So once the form is submitted, okay, we're going to be doing a few things. Submitting the form can be translated in jQuery by selecting the form. Okay, so you're going to select the form using its ID. So if you remember, the ID of the sign-up form was sign-up form. Okay, and then we're going to use a method called submit. So this method is going to take as a parameter a function. Okay, so this function is going to be executed once the form is submitted. So the first thing we want to do is to prevent the default PHP processing. So a form by default is going to be processed using the file we put inside the action attribute. And if there is no action attribute, the form is going to be processed using the same file where the form is located. Okay, so in our case, we want to prevent this default PHP processing. So to do this, we're going to need to give our function a parameter. Let's call it event. Okay, so this parameter is an object, and we can use many methods for this object. So the method we need to use here is called prevent default. Okay, so by using this method, we're going to prevent the default PHP processing. Then we need to collect the user inputs. So this means that we're going to be storing the user inputs inside a variable. Okay, we're going to do this in an easy way so that we can pass the user inputs to the AJAX calls in an easy way. Okay, so to do this, we're going to select the form again. Okay, you can use this selector again. Otherwise, we can just use the keyword this. Okay, because we have already selected the form. Okay, and now we are inside the function or the method that we used with the form. Okay, and then we're going to use a method called serialize array. Okay, so we're going to store this inside a variable that we're going to call data to post. Okay. First, let's get an idea what the outputs of this method looks like. So you're going to print something in our console using the console.log function. Okay. So we're gonna print the variable data to post. So let's refresh the page and try something in our sign-up form. Okay. Okay, and let's click on sign up. Now let's bring the console. So I'm going to click on F12. And we can see that the variable data to post is actually an array. So it's going to be an array of objects, okay, which can be encoded as a JSON string. So if you look at any of these objects, you'll find the name of the input. Okay, so for instance, we've got the username there and the value that we have inputs in our form. Okay, so the second one is the email, and you can see the value that we have inputs in the email field. So that's how the data is going to be transferred in the AJAX call to the signup.php file. Okay, and then we're gonna process the data in there using the code, the PHP code we're going to write in there. All right. Okay, so now we collected the user inputs, okay, and we are ready to write the AJAX call. So this is the step we're going to move to, okay? So to write the AJAX call, you can choose from a couple of methods. So the first method is by using the AJAX function, okay? And the syntax is just like this. So this function is going to take a few parameters, okay? So one of those parameters is going to be the URL where we're sending the AJAX call. Another one is the type of the call, whether we're going for a post call or a get call, and other parameters like the data to send, what to do if the call is successful, and also what to do if the call is not successful. So all this goes inside the parameters. If you don't want to use this function, you can use either the post function or the get function, depending on whether you're going for a post call or a get call. So to use the post function, the syntax is like this, okay? Very similar to the AJAX function. And you place your parameters inside, okay? The difference between this one and that one is that when you want to specify what to do if the call is successful, you're going to need to add a method at the end, okay, where you write a function in there saying what to do if the call is successful, okay? And also you're going to need to do the same thing, okay, for when the call is not successful using the fail method, okay? And that works similar with the get function. So I'm going to go for the first one because it's a lot easier, okay, as we're going to be placing all the parameters inside the function rather than writing a method outside the function, okay? But just make sure that if you use the post method, okay, the post function, just make sure that you have both a method done, okay, for a successful call, and also a method fail for a call that is not successful. Okay, so now inside our AJAX function, we're going to have a few parameters. So the first parameter is going to be the URL where we are sending our data, okay? So in our case, we are sending the data to the signup.php file, okay? So between double quotes, we're gonna write the name of our file, okay? And then we're gonna have the type of our call, okay? So the type of the call, okay, this is supposed to be a comma. So the type of the call here is going to be a post call, okay? So this is very similar to submitting the form using the post method, okay, rather than the get method. Okay, and the next one is going to be the data, okay, that we are sending. In our case, we are sending the data to post variable, okay? And then we're gonna have a couple of parameters. Now we're gonna have a success parameter, and then we're gonna have an error parameter, okay? So the first one is going to tell us what to do if the call is successful, and the second one is going to say what to do if it's not successful. So let's start with the success. So we're going to define a function to execute, okay, if the call is successful. All right. So our signup.php file is going to return either a success message or an error message, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to give this function a variable, let's call it data, okay? So if the call is successful, whatever the signup file is going to return is going to be stored inside the variable data, okay? So what we want to do, we want to show the error message or the success message of the signup file, okay, at the top of our signup form, okay? So if you try something here. Let's try error message. Okay, so that's where the error message appears. So that's what the signup.php file returned. Okay, so if you remember, we created a div, okay, and we called it signup message. So that's where we're gonna show the success or error message coming from the signup.php file. So to do this in JavaScript, we're going to select this div, okay, let's use its ID, okay, and then we're gonna use the HTML method, okay, and we're gonna use the data variable, okay, to change the content of this div. Now, rather than writing this statement straight away, we can check first that the signup file actually returned something, okay? So rather than doing this, we can check if data, okay? So this means that this variable is not empty. If data, then we execute our statement. Just like this. All right. All right, now let's move to the error parameter, okay? Now we're gonna define another function to execute if the AJAX call is not successful. All right. So if the AJAX call is not successful, what we're going to do, we're just gonna go to this div, okay? And we're just gonna write an error message inside this div, okay? So let's copy this line, okay, and rather than using the variable data, we're gonna write something in here, okay? So we're gonna have a div, okay. I chose a div so that we can add some decoration there. So let's give this div a class alert and also alert danger, okay, to get something like this. All right, and let's write some text inside this div. So for example, we can say there was an error with the AJAX call. Please try again later. Okay. All right, now let's make sure our code is working. Okay, so let's go for an unsuccessful AJAX call. So for example, we can have the wrong file, okay, for instance. So let's try this. Okay, and if we try this, okay, we can see that the AJAX call was not successful. Okay, so let's go back to the right file, and let's write something inside our signup file. For instance, yeah, just echo success. Okay, and let's place this inside PHP tags. Okay, let's save and let's refresh. Okay, and we can see our success message in there. Okay, so at the moment it's not decorated, but we're going to do this later. So now we have our AJAX call. Okay, and we have covered all these steps okay, if the AJAX call is successful or not. Okay. Now let's move to the signup.php file. We're going to go back to the other AJAX calls later, okay, in our JavaScript file. All right. Now, before we start writing PHP code inside our file, I'd like to mention something very important about security. Our users are going to be sending sensitive information like their email address and password to our web server, and we are responsible for the protection of that data. So to do this, you can use something called SSL, which stands for Secure Sockets Layer. So this is a standard security technology that you can use to establish an encrypted link between the browser and your web server. Okay, so once you have that link, all the data passed between the browser and your web server is gonna stay private. Okay, so once you do that, you're gonna get something like this at the beginning of your address. Okay, so to get SSL, you can purchase an SSL certificate for 1 year. Okay, but you can't have that with a subdomain. Okay, you're gonna need to have your own domain. So for now, you can keep your subdomain and do this without SSL for learning purposes. But once you have a real website and you have actual users using that website, then you will need to protect the data of your users using an SSL certificate. All right. Okay, now let's move to our signup.php file. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to start a session. And the reason why we want to start a session is because we're going to be setting some session variables later on, okay, in the code. All right, so to start a session, the syntax is session underscore start. Okay, so once you do that, you are then ready to store data in the session variable. Okay, so let's place everything inside the PHP tags. Okay,